Rich, blockchain technology is rapidly moving into the mainstream, and our next guest runs one of the leading players. Let's bring in Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse. Good to have you with us, Brad. It's been a year since we saw each other. Let's talk about XRP, which facilitates instant payments between parties like banks. I mean, what kind of traction are you seeing?
Well, I'm incredibly pleased to see how much traction people are seeing with, let's solve a real problem with digital assets. You know, historically, I think there's been a lot of hype in the crypto ecosystem, a lot of experiments, and we're able to look at what we're doing with XRP and really accelerate the adoption and help banks take advantage of what is possible through these digital assets.
Of course, there is an entrenched player already in SWIFT. I mean, how much are you denting the business of SWIFT?
Well, so we look at SWIFT as a company that has certainly defined how cross-border payments have been enabled. That's also existed for a couple decades, really almost 4 decades, for how that system works. We feel like there's an opportunity to bring the system into the modern world or into the internet world, where today a SWIFT transaction can take days. You don't know for sure if it's arrived. It's almost like a postcard. The only way you know is your friend says, hey, I received that. And I think in a world of the internet where people expect I can order an Uber and it shows up right away, you know, a Gojek, what have you, these are the expectations people have with regard to how financial systems should work in the modern era.
Brad, tell me here then, you know, where does this go? I mean, let's have a look at just effectively what we have. We've got so many cryptocurrencies out there. You know, you're one of the front runners, but the thing is, are there too many of you guys?
You know, actually, I agree with you. I think there are too many. There are around 3,000 different digital assets that trade on a daily basis now. I think, you know, anytime there's a new market, there's a lot of people that run into that market and try to show that they can solve a problem, they can deliver a customer need. I have said publicly before that I think 99% of all crypto probably goes to zero. But there is that 1% where I think that is focused on solving a real problem for real customers and is able to do that at scale. And that's going to be game-changing. And I think that's going to continue to grow significantly in the decades ahead.
I mean, they're probably one of the reasons why there is so much instability in terms of the price here. But, you know, you want to be you are a currency, you want to be a unit of transfer here. But the problem is, if you transferred some money to somebody else, that may be worth much less by the time they want to actually cash it in, if they do cash it in. So, you know, how do you actually produce some stability in all this?
You know, it turns out this is a false narrative. It turns out when you enable a SWIFT transaction, volatility is a calculation of both time and volatility. So a SWIFT transaction can take 2 to 3 days, where an XRP transaction takes a few seconds. And it turns out the volatility of enabling a SWIFT transaction is much higher than enabling an XRP transaction because of the time. We actually just did a post on the Ripple website explaining the math behind this, but it turns out that the volatility risk is lower with an XRP transaction.
Investors are pretty concerned about the sell-off we're seeing in Ripple, and they say that it is bigger than expected. Is there reason to be worried about it?
Well, I think probably the sell-off in XRP versus the sell-off in Ripple is a private company. We have our shareholders. It's you can't trade Ripple shares, so to speak. XRP, you know, look, we pay attention over the long haul. I tell the employees I don't think about it on 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 months. You know, taking advantage of what digital assets can do to make transactions more efficient, I think, is a journey we'll be on for a decade or two. I describe it as a marathon, and we're on kind of mile 2. So I don't think about the price of XRP in the short term. I think if we can enable XRP to be the most efficient, measured by speed of a transaction, the cost of a transaction, more and more people will use it. So nothing to be worried about. Nothing to be worried about when you take a look at this sell-off. I think there's going to continue to be volatility in crypto broadly, right? The whole market kind of moves together a little bit, and there's times when XRP has outperformed Bitcoin. There's times it's underperformed Bitcoin. But I think as you look at this as a long-term journey, I'm quite optimistic about where we see the whole market. There's a lot of bullish trends for the whole crypto ecosystem.
Brad, then of course, you know, other people and some of the big players want to get a slice of the action, and I'm talking about Libra. Now tell me about your concerns about Libra and some of the things which Libra does represent which are good.
Well, I think what's good is a number of people, obviously, in the crypto space, and certainly what Ripple has embraced, is this idea of how do we reduce friction, how do we reduce cost, how do we bring people who are unbanked or underbanked into the financial system. And so that's a vision we certainly embrace. And Facebook's effort to kind of go direct to consumer, I think, is one approach. The challenge is, I think, that all financial systems, all financial tools, they're built on trust. And with Facebook as the lead horse around Libra, I think it's fair to say, Facebook has really had a trust deficit based upon a lot of things that have happened to the company and the things they have done. So I think it's going to be hard for Libra to kind of, using that foundation of trust from Facebook, to get a lot of momentum. As you know well, there's a lot of regulatory scrutiny and questions that are still not yet answered. I think the good news is key people like Mark Zuckerberg have said they won't go live until those things are clarified.
Jamie Dimon says, nice idea, but it won't happen. Is it too soon to write it off?
I think it's too soon to write it off, but I also think you obviously seen a lot of the momentum shift. It came out in June with a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. Since that time, you've seen the likes of MasterCard and PayPal and others step away. Although I think a lot of that's because of the regulatory uncertainty. I think Facebook took a pretty aggressive, arguably maybe naive a little bit, that they could just run into this and do this despite a lot of concerns. I think certainly the way Ripple approaches the world is we're going to work with regulators. We're going to partner with them from the earliest stages. We've done that here in Singapore. We've done that around the world, and I think that has served us well in terms of building momentum across all of our customers.
Brad, my final question is, we've got so many of these cryptocurrencies starting, I've already asked you about that. A lot of them are going to fall by the wayside. No doubt you're going to still be there in a year's time. But how will this ecosystem look in a year from now?
That's a great question. I think the system is going to continue to evolve, where years ago, really, crypto was solving a little bit of illicit, kind of Silk Road and illicit use cases. Then it moved to really a speculative bubble that we saw. And I think you're going to continue to see in 2019 and 2020 and beyond the focus on utility. How are these technologies, how are these digital assets solving real problems for real customers? And absent that real utility, I don't think you're going to see the whole market grow and live up to its potential. It's the reason why Ripple has been so focused on a specific customer, a specific problem, and we've been fortunate to build a lot of momentum with that customer set.
Brad, always good to have you with us. Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse there, here in the Lion City. Still to come.